Welcome to The Forgotten, Episode 11. If we need you, we'll call you. Well, here we are, guys. After a delay of several weeks, the last episode on our dear August is finally finished. I'm terribly sorry for all those delays. First of all, the HDD I had all relevant files on broke down, so I had to replace it, and I did not find the time to re-record the episode, since the last weeks were extremely busy, and the episode was planned to be aired the last week before the busy times. I hope you can forgive me, and I did not want to waste this time completely. Research on the next series, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., if you remember, is going great. But not to waste any more time on apologizing the unforgivable, here we are, smelling the new, fresh air of Europe without the oppression from Paris, where the people themselves, had bore the brunt of the wars of liberation, with the Freikorps, the Landwehr, and the general conscription. We are entering a period based on a totally new self-confident populace, especially a massively patriotic, yet still very liberal bourgeoisie, clamoring for their rights. After all, they had defeated Napoleon, not the powdered brainlets in their nice palaces, but the hard-working burghers, farmers, workers and soldiers, which had flocked to the Prussian, Austrian, Russian and British banners. How could they possibly be excluded from power after all they had done for their countries? Enter the Vienna Congress, also the reason that I used the prefix "re" that often this time. After Napoleon had been exiled to Elba, it had been clear that what had been left of Europe after the devastating wars could not go on business as usual. A new order had to replace the old system, especially in Germany, where the fractured states from the 18th century had been replaced by Napoleon's client kings and princes. As you can imagine, they were not too keen on having their territory split up again. So the major European powers had to reorganize the relationships and their spheres of influence. This was the birth of what historians call the Pentarchy, the rule of five. Those five, obviously, were Russia, Prussia, Austria, Great Britain and France. Wait, did I say France? Yes, of course. You have to imagine the coalition wars to be a war against Napoleon and the Revolution, not against the territorial integrity of France. The French king, Louis XVIII, a Bourbon monarch, was placed on the French throne again, which he was forced to leave when Napoleon came back to France, and which he then regained after Napoleon had been defeated once again. The aforementioned Metternich was wise enough to see that European power politics without a powerful French monarchy in the western half of the continent was too unstable to work in a long shot. Those five states were to peacefully resolve any conflict that could possibly ensue, and to further prevent revolutions or, God forbid, the creation of any democratic and liberal government anywhere in Europe. Bad enough the Americans had it, but no way could they tolerate it on the European soil. So the Pentarchy decided to at least closely monitor the interior politics inside their respective spheres of influence. Interestingly, the final act of the Congress was signed on the 9th of June, so 9 days before Napoleon was even defeated, and when it was more than only uncertain that he even would be. I'm not going to list all the border changes here, since it would take lots of unnecessary time and it is more than easy to look them up yourself, but it is to be said that the French did not lose any core territory that was not captured after the revolution, and that Prussia was considered a major winner, since it absorbed many of the smaller Western German states, as well as Austria, pretty much controlling the whole of northern Italy. Russia making the territory of Congress Poland, as it was called, its own territory, and the British absorbing most colonies France still had left. Another interesting mention is that both Switzerland and Sweden have not participated in any European war ever since. The Congress led to the historical period we call the Restoration, the re-establishment of the old social order in all of Europe. Metternich, the informal head of the Congress, was a staunch conservative and had imagined the Pentarchy as a guardian of order in Europe. As you can imagine, some states, like Russia, had less problems with it than others. Although Russia had its own problems, the Decabrist uprising, for example. In Germany, where the two major players, Austria and Prussia, had no direct influence on interior politics of the German states, especially in the bigger ones like Bavaria or Saxony, both states did not agree in their handling of certain situations all the time. The situations quickly required a very strong police force and political observation of dissidents, which of course caused severe interior problems which would explode in the 1884 revolutions in Vienna, Berlin and all the other German states. But not to digress from the plot too far again, how does this entire situation affect the protagonist of this story and his political and military career? Well, after the short exhilaration about the victory over the French, his old depressions quickly struck again. Responding to one of Clausewitz's many letters, which told him about the rumor that he should partake in the peace talks in Paris as a royal Prussian emissary, he wrote that luck and my friends had stood by my side time and again. And this is how I came to fame and honors. I myself do not know how, but I know how much I did not earn them myself. The feeling of not having deserved them is so strong that I am starving for the moment where I can lay down all those honors and fame and return to my quiet, dark, private life. Your congratulations, old friend, which do make me blush a little, are still very welcome to me, because I know they come from a heart that is incapable of lies. The relationship between Clausewitz and Gneisenau was quite interesting, to say the least. Just like Gneisenau had been the student of the great Scharnhorst, Clausewitz, although mostly by letters, became the student of Gneisenau. Both had been best friends in all the crises that had struck them in Prussia, from Gneisenau having to leave Prussian service to Clausewitz not being re-accepted into it. The tone of their letters had been quite familiar from the earliest days, and Gneisenau had always been rather satisfied around the not-too-complex young gentleman, who must have reminded him of his drinking days in Erfurt during his failed studies. Please note that this was before Clausewitz writing Vom Kriege on war, but the rather young man, 35 at this time, already established himself as an excellent staffer and marvelous military theoretician. Gneisenau's bad moods are further heated by him witnessing the debates and the congresses before the Treaty of Paris. To an old friend he writes that the soldier has done his thing more than right, and now the diplomat steps in his way, saying, "My friend, what a clumsy fellow you are. You don't know how to treat people correctly. They are so much more mannered than you, and they want to be addressed with cute little phrases. You are only able to talk with your guns. We'll see to it that you don't have to wear those rag tunics anymore, and maybe, if we're so kind, we'll even give some pences to you. But don't you dare coming into our houses. Wait outside so we can give you what we have through the window. If we need you, we'll call you. But now we don't." Ouch. The Count can't stop complaining. He calls the Austrians greedy, wanting to take as much of the prey from them as possible, and that Russia just wants France to remain strong so it can still threaten Austria. He himself votes for weak France, since the Russians, undoubtedly the leading continental power, could be addressed properly if needed, without a massive pro-Russian France in their backs. One of the major blows to his self-esteem is that his friend, the Tsar of Russia, had been heard saying to his generals after a very heated discussion on the 16th of September that, "Gentlemen, it is more than possible that we have to aid the King of Prussia against his own army some day." An utterance Gneisenau dubbed, absolutely understandably in my eyes, outrageous. All this leads to him getting sick. His gout, already the scourge of his old days, gets more intense every day, so intense that even the papers in Berlin start reporting about it. On the 3rd of October, the negotiations still going strong, the king orders Gneisenau to go on vacation to Italy for 3 months, and handing him the vast sum of 25,000 thalers as a premium for his victories and his great services. Gneisenau, however, states that there is too much work to do and that he has to stay in Paris for at least 4 more weeks. After the Treaty of Paris is finally signed on the 20th of November, leading to massive new war contributions, the reduction of France to his 1790 borders, and the stationing of 150,000 men as an occupation force, Gneisenau moves to commanding an army corps in Koblenz, one of the nicest cities modern Germany has. His chief of staff is the young now again Prussian colonel von Clausewitz. He continues to be rather unhappy, still bombarding Hardenberg, the Prussian chancellor, with letters asking to be honorably discharged, which Hardenberg does not even answer anymore. This leads to him addressing the king personally, which is not an unheard of step in those times, but a grave insult to the chancellor, who time and again has advised him not to do so. This way, Gneisenau loses his only real friend at court, which will cause the Berlin snake pit to go at it again, as we will see shortly. On the 20th of April, a letter arrives in Koblenz. The king is not willing to completely discharge him from service, but at least he grants him an indefinite vacation with full payment. What he did not know, and what had discredited him in the eyes of the king and the mass of his court, was that he was seen as the head of the Tugendbund. The Tugendbund, literally the League of Virtue, was an organization which very closely resembled the Freemasons. They had been founded in 1808 to revive the Prussian national honor. While Gneisenau, as all of the Prussian reformers, was a member, he most certainly was not in command. The very liberal and democratic association became, after being rendered useless after the final victory over the French, a thorn in the side of the Prussian establishment, and quickly became the subject of shrewd observation by the Prussian secret police. However, the rumors of him being the head of his league led to his old adversaries Ancillon and Marwitz branding him a Jacobin, a revolutionary, and further pushing him out of the inner circle of the Prussian king, which he, as we all know, never really entered. The king, however, saw his own thoughts about Gneisenau's dubious political stance more than confirmed. So, on the 20th of May, Gneisenau is finally ordered to leave the Lower Rhine, and he moves to his estate in Silesia. From there, he writes to an old friend, "Out of the last 11 years, I have lived 10 absolutely separated from my children, and now I will finally try to get to know them." But his respite is short-lived. On the 30th March 1816, he has to report as a Secretary of War and Exterior Affairs. Of course, Gneisenau is not happy about this, as he had probably seen himself spending his old days with something else than sitting at his desk and working through day and night. To Clausewitz in Koblenz, Gneisenau writes, "I was so lucky with my kids around me. And now I am called to service again, a call I can't refuse, as the talks about my opposition to the government would have been revived twice as strong." He spends his days with watching the younger men discuss and debate, but mostly on his own, shutting himself from the public as much as possible. Nonetheless, he is showered with honors. In 1818, he is promoted to the representative post of Governor of Berlin, which finally strips him of every executive power, and he gets the honorary command of the Prussian Infantry Regiment No. 9. In 1819, he gets command over the Military Examination Commission, an early administrative post, not having a political say anymore, as the reactionary powers in Berlin still cut his path wherever he goes. This is where the chronicles and biographies of his life get shorter and shorter. Gneisenau does not really do anything anymore, except writing tons of letters to everyone around him, especially Blücher, who died in 1819, and Clausewitz, reminiscing the old days and musing about fate, fatherland, and so on. What he did not know is that the paranoia of the still popular general leading a revolt is so big that the Prussian secret police controlled each and every letter he wrote. But they would have hardly found something. Gneisenau, bitter as he became, changed his mind to a very, very conservative position. His promotion to Feldmarschall, Field Marshal, on the 10th anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo was just formal, since his office had been dissolved in 1820 out of monetary reasons. His last redeeming action was taking over the forces that were to shield the Prussian border from the Polish revolutionaries in November 1830. And here we are, in his last days. Eastern Europe at this time was struck by a terrible epidemic of cholera, which costs hundreds of thousands of lives. The Prussian forces, now preventing any access of infected into Prussian territory, of course contracted the virus as well. To his son-in-law, Wilhelm von Scharnhorst, the son of his dead friend Gerhard, he wrote on the 1st of May 1831, "I myself do not think the cholera is too dangerous or contagious. But in the night of the 23rd of August, at 2 o'clock in the morning, according to Clausewitz's report, the Feldmarschall suffered from terrible diarrhea, which immediately was identified as cholera. Although the doctors did all they could, the 71-year-old body of the Field Marshal was not able to withstand the disease. At 10, August Wilhelm Antonius Graf Neidhart von Gneisenau, Prussian Field Marshal and hero of many battles, as well as one of the main doctors that cured the Prussian states from its many diseases in the time after 1806, died of the disease he feared so little, and which would also take the life of his old friend Clausewitz, after himself taking command of the Prussian forces later that year." Well, again, here we are at the end of this series. I'm not at all certain whether anyone expects a big conclusion, but let me try. We have seen the full circle from the young, energetic officer to famed general to grumpy old man. No, that's too easy. But what we have seen is that the strong man who saved the state together with his friends would later suffer the consequences at the hands of lesser men. It is easy to tell the story that way, depicting Gneisenau as the saintly savior of the Kingdom of Prussia. But after all, each man has his weaknesses, and Gneisenau was not free of them. A rash character, his insolent hate for the French, his self-doubts, all of this must also play into the picture of this great man. I admire him. And it makes me sad that of all of the days the year has, he decided to die on the one day that I was born, August 23rd. Let us honor this great man, as we will hopefully honor any great man we will come across. At the end of this first series, I want to thank anyone who listened, anyone who asked questions, anyone who debated any topic with me, and of course my family and especially my girlfriend, who bore the brunt of dealing with me nerding out or spending time with reading and writing rather than doing something with them. If you liked the series, feel free to leave a like, subscribe, follow, comment, or do whatever you please, or tell your friends about it. Furthermore, if you find you want to contribute to the series directly, feel free to become a patron on Patreon. I will post the link in the description. I will be on vacation the next 3 weeks, visiting the great island of Crete in the Mediterranean, visiting old temples and of course the Melim airfield, where the German Fallschirmjäger landed, as well as hanging out on the beach of course. So after that, we will come here again and look at the next topic, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. and his footprint on American history. At the end of this series, I wish to leave on a different musical note, so I hope you will enjoy an orchestral version of the Pilgrim's Chorus from Richard Wagner's opera Tannhäuser. I wish you a good day or a good night. See you next time.